Ramona Shelburne, Plasma One. There's Tim Kalishaw, Kevin Blackistone, Pablo Estori. Good afternoon. Today, the Patriots and their magic mystery machine quarterback. How the Atlanta Braves are affecting the NL playoffs. Where the Georgia Tech gives Clemson a test tonight. And the man who was Throwy Bats, now Joey Backs. Let's go around the horn.
Just run around the base.
Nice beard.
It's Around the Horn, presented by Crown Royal Regal Apple, part of Happy Hour.
Colin Kaepernick, the cover of Time magazine.
I'm proud of y'all for doing that together. Bigger than basketball.
The Indiana Fever
People
last night.
are still missing the point. The reason these guys are kneeling, the reason we're locking arms is to bring people together, to make people aware that this is not right.
Richard Sherman yesterday.
Terrence Crutcher. I mean, it doesn't matter what side you're on the Kaepernick stuff. You better be disgusted about the things that are happening.
And Steve Kerr.
Sometimes it's a lose-lose. You know what I'm saying? You say something in one sense and everybody's saying you're a traitor. You say something in another sense and, oh, he's just too real. If I say something, it's going to be critique. And if I don't say something, oh, you fake or you flaw.
We'll focus on Cam Newton to start here because he and the Panthers have a football game at home in Charlotte Sunday. The team and the NFL today meeting to discuss how to proceed. Keith Lamont Scott shot 15 minutes from the stadium. Tim, are you beginning to question whether the NFL should play in Charlotte Sunday, or you think they should move the game?
I think they have to think about it. I think they're going to have to come to a decision tomorrow. I think you'll have to see what happens tonight and see if it's a much calmer night in downtown Charlotte. I've been to a lot of games there, and you stay at those hotels and you walk to the stadium, and that's right where the fans are going to be. That's right where the teams, the Minnesota Vikings, would be. So you certainly have to be thinking about those things. I don't know what the availability of, stadiums on the other side of the state in Raleigh or Chapel Hill or any place else might be. You don't like to do that, but you have to be realistic about it. If tonight looks anything like last night, then I don't really think you can play a game there Sunday.
Kevin Blackistone?
They should announce by the time this show is over that they are moving or postponing the game. The state issued a state of emergency, the governor did, for the city of Charlotte. And when Arnold Schwarzenegger did that back in 2003 during the Cedar Fire in the state of California, they moved the game from San Diego to Tempe, Arizona. This is a simple matter to be done. It's not like the NFL hasn't done this before. We just saw the NFL move preseason games at the end of the preseason schedule because of the hurricane coming into the southeastern part of the United States. So this is not a big deal. The big deal is why people are protesting. This is much larger than just a mere football game. There are other businesses that are shutting down or have had to shut down in and around Charlotte because of the urban rebellion that's going on there right now, and the NFL should follow suit.
Pablo Torre.
Yeah, I don't doubt that the police there, whatever governmental armed forces they bring there, can secure the arena. That, to me, seems like a foregone conclusion. If they want to put enough people there, they can make that safe. But the reality is that sports is America's town hall for this kind of discussion. The NFL specifically is America's open forum for this kind of discussion. And sometimes when sports and life really do bleed all over each other like this, the proper response from sports is to abdicate. It's to step back and say there are more important things happening, There is stuff happening here that is not just a matter of culture war, which is how a lot of people in this country can see it, understandably. It's a matter of life and death. And if you're not going to create a response that meets the gravity of that proposition, there are people who died here, then I think that's a problem that sports as town hall should reckon with in a really real way.
For those, Pablo, that say sports is an outlet, and this is an outlet that's needed at this moment, you'd say what?
I'd say that physically speaking, on every literal level, metaphorical level, you cannot separate the two. Not just because, as Tim said, these things are so closely located next to each other, but also because this is where we come to talk. And sometimes you got to say, this is more important than that.
And Ramona Shelburne.
Well, look, Pablo, you're exactly right. Sports are our town hall right now. And the people that everyone are listening to are the athletes. They have a forum and a megaphone that they haven't used or had in the past. And I think, to see Michael Jordan put another statement out here, to see Cam Newton spend 12 minutes of his press conference talking about something that he has been very reluctant to speak about in the past. This shows you the gravity of the situation right there, and also the connection that athletes have with their communities. People listen to what they have to say. The people in the streets are listening to what Cam Newton is saying, are listening to what Michael Jordan is saying. And I think right now is a moment that the city of Charlotte, who we've talked about a lot in other contexts with what's going on in that state and all the championships that have been moved out of the state of North Carolina, finds itself as sort of ground zero of where all the cultural discussions in this country right now are intersecting.
I want to go deeper here on the position Cam Newton finds himself in, if we can, because ESPN reported during the protest last night in the city, a man carried a megaphone shouting if Cam Newton stood during the national anthem, his jerseys would be burned. Kevin, how do you consider that, and how do you consider the 12 minutes he spent addressing it all?
Well, if Cam Newton releases himself from his contract to go play for another team, a rival, they'll probably burn his jersey for that as well. So I don't put much stock into that. Look, this isn't really about how it impacts you. It's about what you've come to learn about a situation, how you feel about it, and how you want to express it. I thought that, Cam Newton earlier this year put himself in a position where people thought they knew his politics when he suggested that he was a African-American quarterback with skills and a skill set that people had never seen before, and they should be frightened of him. And then he backed away from those comments, and now he's kind of all over the place and is just not as well studied, I don't think, on this issue. And it's fine, to sometimes not raise your hand and say something. I think in a lot of ways we've kind of jumped the shark on this issue because now we're all of a sudden turning to every athlete we can find to have them to respond to something that's going on in the community. I heard somebody dug up Muggsy Bogues today to talk about Charlotte, what was going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, for goodness sakes.
But Cam Newton is the face of the Carolina Panthers. He's the MVP of the league. This is happening in Charlotte.
But he's not the face of the city of Charlotte.
And yesterday he elected to take 12 minutes. So I know you said he was all over the place, but specifically in his 12 minutes yesterday, what did you take away from it?
I took away that he's confused and that he's afraid of being construed in a way that he does not want to be construed.
Tim, how about you?
Well, I mean, I have a couple of problems with the criticisms of Cam Newton. First, one, we're reaching a point where it's going to be better for everybody to just shut up and not answer anything if we're going to take if they talk for 10 minutes and they make sense for 9.5 and we question what they said over here, that's going to get all the focus. We know that already. Two, I mean, yeah, he brought up an issue that a lot of people don't want. He didn't even mention it by name, but he was referring to black-on-black crime, and he's been criticized on this network for doing that because that's not part of the discussion they want to have. That's over here. Leave that over here. We're not allowed to talk about that. We're only talking about police brutality against black people right now. The other bigger part that doesn't get much mention is what Colin Kaepernick is doing in the Bay Area and what Richard Sherman is saying in Seattle. Those are very different places from Charlotte, North Carolina. And to be a black quarterback in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you don't think you have to straddle a little bit of a fence there to pull that off, then I don't think you're paying attention.
Pablo Torre.
Yeah, I would say that any kind of clearly nonviolent discussion on this issue tends to be a net positive. But Tim, I think there's a clarification we can make here. Like, I don't object to him bringing up the issue of black-on-black crime. What I am worried about, as I am with even Colin Kaepernick, with any athlete who speaks out right now, is I want to know how much of the capitalism of his job, of the industry, is affecting and making murkier his actual opinions. As KB was alluding to, it seems like Cam Newton, ever since he realized that this platform that he has, as big as it is, has been trying to calculate, when do I put myself in trouble from a purely self-interested position, which is fine. But my issue is then when you bring in someone like Frank Luntz, this pollster who's responsible for phrases like the death tax and climate change to mask issues, that's messaging. That's explicit political messaging that the Panthers paired Cam Newton with that has to cast doubt over his comments. And by the way, I would be as suspicious if Colin Kaepernick had an equivalent figure in his ear. All I want from these athletes is, honesty and thoughtfulness and some research done on their behalf. And when you bring in this messaging type stuff where someone is clearly grappling with capitalism and substance and not sure which way to go, that for me is the big issue.
Ramona Shelburne?
You know what Cam Newton sounds like to me is a guy who's torn. I mean, I think when I read that GQ article he was quoted extensively in, and the evolution from that article where he basically said, I don't want to say anything, to now where he finds himself as the black quarterback in a city that is crying right now, literally crying in the streets. Where he has to say something. He doesn't know what he feels. He sees all the sides yet, and he's finding his way there. And I think, he seems like a guy who's torn, but I think Steve Kerr, in a lot of ways, expressed what a lot of people are feeling right now, which is simply, you can see both sides. You can see all 3, 4, 5 sides of this, but you have to see what is happening in the streets with people being gunned down in the streets and the outrage that provokes, and you have to be disgusted by it. I thought Steve Kerr was very eloquent in speaking about that, and part of it is simply Steve Kerr being a coach and a leader of men who's had all summer to watch what's happened in this country and think about what his players are going to do next week when NBA training camps open up.
Kalishaw.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the thing Pablo did about Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster hired by Carolina. That's a weird thing to begin with, and that's just another thing Cam has to deal with that other quarterbacks don't have to deal with. The other thing I would say is that when Cam or anybody else, if the point of Colin Kaepernick and all this, and as Richard Sherman said, is to start a conversation, it sometimes seems if people continue that conversation and it's not exactly the way it began, then all of a sudden they don't want to have a conversation. They just want to say that person's wrong and they need to go get educated about something before they speak again.
I was going to say, Ramona, you're absolutely right. He is torn. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in Souls of Black Folk how our souls are often torn asunder. But I would say that he is confused when he brings up this phrase black on black crime, because all crime, most murders in this country are intraracial murders. And so this is not an issue that is being dealt with down there. We're talking about the fact that I, as a black man, am 2.5 times more likely to be shot and killed by a police officer in this country than anybody else. That's an issue.
Thanks for your time and your thoughts. We're going to take a break right here. Rest of the day in sports in Buy or Sell.
Around the Horn is presented by Crown Royal Regal Apple. Smooth to the core. Please drink responsibly. Part of Happy Hour.